in Saudi Arabia, you have the king, and then you have the group of gentlemen who are the religious deciders, and they give strong suggestion to the king.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, feel free to expand on that, because they have had a huge impact on various aspects of Saudi life, but is that also a constant through numerous Islamic states throughout the world, to have that group?
Well, there's always the group of ulama. Every country has its ulama, its religious leaders, and Saudi Arabia is no exception to that. But the difference is that when the first Saudi state was founded in 1742 or so, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, who was the anti-idolatrous sheikh opposing innovations and so on in the area where the Saudi royal family was ruling, and at that time they were only ruling a village or a single small town, and the next town 5 kilometers away had a different ruler, made a family compact with Muhammad ibn Saud al-Saud. So Muhammad ibn Saud made an agreement with Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab that Muhammad ibn Saud would be the political ruler and Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab would have religious authority. And that family compact has persisted down to this day, so that the Mufti of Saudi Arabia of today, Abdulaziz al-Sheikh, is a direct descendant in the male line of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. And the king is the direct descendant of Muhammad ibn Saud. And so you have this amazing family compact that has lasted for 250 years, where the idea is that the sheikhs will have influence and the ruler will enforce that. That's not exactly the way that things worked in all the other states. And it has a lot of local color of the province of Najd, and Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab's own original teaching involved the independence of Najd from the world around, because Najd was a backwater which had no major cities in it and had no religious authority whatsoever. So the ulama of Najd used to go to the Turkish Empire, to Damascus, to Baghdad, to Basra, or to the holy cities of Mecca and Medina to study, and then they come back to Najd and be religious leaders. Well, it seemed to the Saudi princes and to Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab that was very bad. And they needed instead to have their own thing, so they made various exclusionary doctrines that said all those people out there are bad Muslims, we're the good Muslims. And so the exclusionary doctrine enabled them to keep all of the teaching in their own country. And so they gained authority of that, and in the various expansions and contractions they would then push that on to the other areas that they took over, like the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. But that was not really the structure that existed elsewhere. But that's not to say that the religious leadership wasn't present and important and separate from the state. But like what happened in Egypt, the Muhammad Ali Pasha, who founded the Egyptian royal family that ruled from 1805 to 1953, technically the period they were on the throne, he just, around 1815, confiscated all the charitable foundations. He just arbitrarily went in and confiscated all the charitable foundations and cut off the resources of the scholars by that. So the scholars after that became dependent more on the state, and therefore had less independence than the Saudi scholars had. And that remained true down to this day, except that the scholars always had the backing of the people. And so consequently they would maneuver between the state and the people, and they managed to hold forth. And the scholars who would be the most anti-state would have the most popularity, and those who would be most pro-state would have the least popularity in Egypt. But in Saudi Arabia, that would not necessarily be the way things worked. So it's not actually like other places. You couldn't say that. And you would have to make a separate study of the relations between the scholars and the ruler in each place to see how that played out. In Morocco, the scholars are very important, but and the royal family is also well established, unlike the parvenu Egyptian royal family who weren't even Egyptians, but were Turks basically, or Albanians. In Morocco, the dynasty came out of Morocco and it claimed Sharifian status, that is, they're descendants of the Prophet and so on. So they also had a special relationship with the ulama that they had to carefully husband and guard. But it just didn't turn out the way the Saudi one did. I mean, it's not the same. I can't, I'd have to go into more detail about exactly how it is different, but it isn't the same. And again, the ulama in Morocco didn't really have the kind of degree of authority the Saudi ulama obtained. And that doesn't mean that today the Saudi ulama either always get their own way, but often they do. And so they've produced this kind of odd hybrid system, which is partly modernized and partly not, and is quite unique in the Muslim world, I would say.
Do you have a comment on Iran?
I was just going to say, I was looking at the clock though. I was in Iran during the revolution, and one of the things that, when you were saying the more anti-state, that they use the word mullahs there, the more anti-state, or an ayatollah, the more anti-state they were, the more popular they became as the Shah became more and more brutal. So there was a direct relationship between the Shah getting more brutal and killing more people and the anti-Shah ayatollahs being able to preach to be able to give sermons that are extremely anti-Shah. And it got to the point, actually the Shah's father was actually dragging mullahs out of in public, dragged them out and beat them. Like just showed up one day on a horse, walked in and dragged an ayatollah out and beat the guy in the town square, like in the little square right in front of the mosque, which didn't exactly make the Pahlavi family popular. And so when the son, Mohammed Pahlavi, came in, because it was a two-person dynasty, and when Mohammed Pahlavi came in, he was the one that really linked closely with the United States, because the U.S. had actually put him on the throne after he was overthrown by the Iranian people. We put him back on the throne, which again is not another way to make yourself popular, and not a good way to make the United States popular. But as he became more and more westernized and more brutal, the ayatollahs became braver and started speaking out against him, to the point where the balance of power tipped. And the ayatollahs were the ones that were able to take over in the end.
With the support of the women, even at first.
Pardon me?
With the support of women.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. The women were out there fighting for the ayatollah to overthrow the Shah. And I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people, and now there's a lot of women on the streets. I mean, right now you've seen riots in Iran recently, and that young woman, what was her name, Nadia or something, that was shot, and you can literally go on the YouTube and watch her die on the streets of Tehran. I mean, yeah, and she wasn't actually participating, she was observing. But with the videos of what's going on right now with these anti-government riots, you have young women out there a lot. And people think, the women are sort of clustered in the house. They have this image of, the women are in the harem and they're in the house and they're not allowed out unless the husband lets them out. During the Islamic Revolution, I mean, I would see girls in, the uniform was white tennis shoes, blue jeans, a black sort of coat covering coat that came down to here, that was actually sometimes sort of tight fitting, but not always, but that was what they were wearing, and a scarf and a machine gun. And that was the outfit. For the revolutionaries who were going against the Shah. And I was in Iran in 2005, and it was interesting because the cool outfit is blue jeans, tennis shoes, and the little jacket, and a scarf, and a cell phone. And when I was there under the Shah, there was this, the tombs of the poets are literally like pilgrims. They revere poetry so much that it's like a pilgrimage that you must make to the tombs of Saadi and Hafiz. And when I was there under the Shah, I noticed how these were sort of like pickup sites, for the teenagers. They would go to the tombs, and they'd look around, the guys would flirt with the girls. And this was under the Shah, so they're all dressed very westernized, and they're very flirtatious. And now when I went back in 2005, I noticed that they were pickup sites for the teenagers. And this time they're texting and they're going, ooh, he's cute, you know, and they would slip these little notes of what's your name, you know, what's your number, and they were texting each other and flirting electronically. But definitely has not changed. And there's this bridge, that's the Sepul bridge that goes over the river in Esfahan, and that's another one. I think Sepul, I think, still has automobile traffic, but there's one that has only foot traffic because it's very, very ancient. And they've just said we can't have anything but foot traffic on this because it's old and we need to protect it. And that it was a pickup site under the Shah, and it's a pickup site now. And so it was really interesting. You walked with all the little white twinkle Christmas lights along the bridge, and the boys and the girls sort of flirting and calling and texting, and so hasn't changed quite as much as one would think.